Welcome to yet another episode, Pound for Pound Boxer Report, episode 490. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this evening, Gail from nyfights.com, as well as Gail Falkenthal on Boxing, Daniel from Full Boxing News, and the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, we're here. We're doing our business. We know that many of you are not catching us live due to competing entertainment, but we're still here for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll just leave it. I'll just leave it at that. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxer Report, Pound for Pound Boxer Report live YouTube show podcast, talking all things boxing. When boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science in any capacity, it will get discussed. If you wish to email us, you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. Um, if you check the description below, you can find where to find Pound for Pound Box Report all over social media platforms. Links to our Facebook page, links to the page on IG, links to the YouTube channel. Pound for Pound Box Report now is we have affiliates, sponsors, if you will, with both Nazar and Nevrad fragrances. Nazar Nazar, Nevrad Nivrad. If you use the code Michael W P4P, let me repeat that, Michael W P4P, you will get 15% off on all purchases over at Nevrad and Nazar fragrances. Last but certainly not least, we do have donation links. Let donation be the best nation. Again, check the description below for those who are checking us out on YouTube. You'll see Cash, Me, and PayPal donation links. Wouldn't matter if it's $1, $2, $5, whatever you want to contribute. It'll help the overall production behind the scenes. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button or follow button, subscribe button, excuse me. That way you'll get notifications of any future episodes or any future episodes, etc., etc. Let's get things going. Let's start in Japan, ladies and gentlemen. We begin the show with ladies first. Always end the show with ladies first. So I go to you, Gail. One of my favorite fighters is Masamichi Yabuki, right? Current IBF champion at 112. He also held a belt down at 108 pounds. Over the weekend, he defended the flyweight title against a fighter by the name of Calixto. I know many people didn't watch it. I did. I covered it for 3kingsboxing.com. Please check out 3kingsboxing.com, your source for all unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to any and everybody over there at 3KB. Dominant performance by Yabuki. He put Calixto down twice in the first round, had his way throughout. I thought he was going to finish him, Gail. Unfortunately, he did not. Hurt him later on in the 10th. Easy decision win. The question is, where does Yabuki go from here? We talked about him last week previewing this fight, and he has options, right? He could stay at 112 and go for a unification bout against Sandoval, who has a unified belt, or Olas Kawaga, who may be the most exciting fighter in the division. But I'm hearing the rumors that Yabuki is starting to have issues making the 112-pound division limit. He could also go up to 115 pounds as well. And with the exit of Bam Rodriguez, the division is pretty much wide open. And there's a potential future opponent should he decide to move up to 115. We'll talk about him in a bit. The future of Masamichi Yabuki, who I like to call a guy who likes to old man these dudes out here with his jab and his experience. And he also is low-key one of the hardest punchers in all of boxing.
You know, if he cannot make the weight, yeah, he needs to move up. And I know that people who are not avid watchers of the lower weight divisions look at these guys who say, I can't make weight, and they'll have to go up a few pounds. You know, you have guys going from 108 to 112, but then 112 to 115, 115 to 118, 3 pounds. Doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're 5'2", it's a lot. It is a lot. So if he can't make the weight, there is no reason for him to struggle because there is a lane open for him. However, if he's going up to 115, there aren't really any assurances 100% at this point that Bam Rodriguez isn't going to track back down. I'd say the odds are against it, but they're not zero because he's always wanted to unify. He's always wanted to unify at 115. He's taking this fight with Vargas because it was presented to him, it was available, and should he be tempted to step quickly into a fight against Inoue, it would be a good idea for him to test himself at the higher weights. But Inoue has said clearly after his fight with Nakatani, he is not fighting the rest of this calendar year. We know Bam is fighting this weekend. See if he can not get himself a belt at 118. I think we'll talk about that in the preview, and odds are pretty good that he can do it. But I don't think he's then willing to wait around for Inoue. I don't know what his options are at 118. If options all of a sudden looking backward open up, if he's ever going to go back down, now's the time. If he waits much longer, that door will shut for him. So, yeah, these options are not perhaps as clear as they seem, but the bottom line is fighters should not be struggling to make weight to the point that camp becomes a weight loss clinic or that affects their performance. No matter what the options are ahead of them, they've got to do it.
I mentioned that there's options for him for Yabuki at 115. A potential fight there, should he decide to move up in weight, is Andrew Moloney, right? Daniel, who fought on the undercard here
Mm-hmm.
in Japan, scored a surprising win over Willibaldo Garcia. I watched the fight. In my personal opinion, I thought Garcia won. He outworked him, but the judges, they counted the precision and the accuracy of Moloney more than the output of Garcia. The interesting thing is there's a connection between Moloney and Bam, right? Bam
Mm-hmm.
wanted to have one more fight at 115 against Garcia, offered Moloney $350,000 to step aside. Moloney said no, took this fight, $42,000 he was only paid, gets the win. And now Moloney's talking about he wants a fight with Bam. I don't know if that will happen, given the option of a fight, given Bam's upcoming bout at 118 and potential bout with Inoue, and just a bit of an update on that. I'm beginning to hear now. I did some checking behind the scenes that Inoue may have a change of heart, and he could fight Bam, thinking of fighting Bam in December, right at the end of the year, New Year's Eve ish, over in Japan.
Yep.
But back to Moloney and Garcia, kind of a feel good story, if you will, because 2 years ago, Moloney was fed up with the sport, had retired, had a change of heart, came back, and now he's a world champion.
He is a world champion, and this is one of those fights that you could go either way. Like, I could see perfectly fine people having Garcia win, just as I'm fine as people seeing the Moloney win, because it was that close. And it was perfect, like the way you described it. It was a situation where you either liked the volume, which is what Garcia was bringing, or you like the precision, which is what Moloney was bringing. But it was so razor thin when it comes to the difference to me. I personally would have scored it to draw. In fact, let me looking at my notes, and I did score to draw. So home now, obviously with Moloney, there's a potential chance to try to get a fight with Bam. But in all honesty, if the situation proves to be true and you get this being Inoue versus Bam in New Year's Eve, I wouldn't mind having these two run it back. because obviously Moloney's going to make a lot more bank now that he has the belt. And on top of that, this is if Bam beats in a way, you could have Moloney on the undercard that fight and set up a fight like that there. It just has to see how you position it, but you gotta give complete props to Moloney. He came in after that layoff, and unfortunately, like I said, that family, when it came to fighting, has not done fairly well in the past few years. But he sat down. He had a couple of years to really think it over, and now he's back with a belt in the division, which makes him a player.
Now, as a point of order, after deciding to call it, it was fed up with the sport back in 2024, I think it was May 2024, as a matter of fact. He did have a fight later on that year, and a fight in late 2025 to kind of put him in a position for this opportunity. But you're right, Daniel. Feel good story. And he bet on himself, Moloney, and we saw it paid off. Now, I didn't talk about this fight last week much, but also on this card, Gail, kind of two guys who've been just there. Well, not there, but prominent fixtures at 118, 122 pound divisions, right? John Riel, Casimero, Luis Nery, they fought on this Yabuki undercard, and dare I say, is kind of poetic justice, if you will. And what I mean by that, Gail, is that Luis Nery has been notorious, right, for coming overweight at the scales. Many people remember the two fights with Kazumi Hasagawa back in roughly, 2017, 2018, in and around that time, when he was fighting at Bantamweight. I believe it was the rematch in which he came in, the second fight in which he came in, roughly 6 pounds overweight, and the fiasco about that, suspended in Japan for a long time. He worked himself back into position to win a world title at 22, right? Nery, I think it was a couple of years ago, put Nery on the deck, got dropped and stopped. Fought Casimero, who just, every time you see him, he's always calling for a fight with Inoue, calling for a fight with Inoue. Well, these two got in the ring, and what happened? Nery misses weight again. He misses weight again and got his comeuppance, if you will, courtesy of Casimero, who hurt him several times, eventually stopped him in 4. What do you make, of Luis Nery? This should be it in terms of his reputation, not only the fact that he lost, but the fact that he failed on the scales, and as well as Casimero, who once again called for a fight with Naoya Inoue. I hear you, Casimero, but Inoue signed to fight you in 2020. It didn't happen. Time to move on.
Yeah, it is. That ship has sailed. When Nery, blew weight in Japan the first time, Japanese Boxing Commission has extremely strict rules. Bravo to them. If you blow weight and you're a foreign-based fighter, as Nery is, they bar you from competing in their country. That's it. You're done. Well, and then they decided to make an exception for Nery when he was paired up with Inoue, right? And that fight, as we all recall, he popped Inoue, had sat him back down on his backside for a knockdown, a real shocker. That was the first one in his pro career. Obviously, Inoue went on to beat him soundly. Now, I think that Japan should have reinstated the ban. So I was, frankly, a little bit shocked to see that Nery's back in Japan, not even facing a Japanese fighter on this card, but fighting, a very decent, sort of title contender kind of guy in Casimero. And he has, I'm going to try to express this without cursing so that YouTube doesn't, penalize you, Michael. But damn it, he had the temerity, he had the nerve to show up in Japan again and fail to make weight again. And he doesn't fail like a tenth of a pound. He makes sure he fails. And then you put a guy like Casimero in the worst possible position because he's put in the time, he did his job, he spent the money. If he doesn't go forward with a fight, he doesn't get a fight, he doesn't get paid. So there's very few times that I actively root for one fighter over another with my professional hat on. But you know what? Good for Casimero. He carried the feelings of all of us that Nery shouldn't have been permitted to fight, should never have been permitted back in the first place. And so we tanned his hide. Excellent. I hope Nery goes back to Mexico. You know what? If he wants to, play the role of journeyman or gatekeeper or whatever, in Tijuana at Big Punch Arena or Gas Mart or the Grand Hotel or the Bull Ring, there's a billion fight venues in Tijuana. It's sort of astonishing. You want to pick up some paychecks there when you're at home and nobody gives a damn about you blowing through the scale because you're just there to get a paycheck. Fine. But what a sad career progression it's been for Nery, who let us all recall when he won his title, that was a massive upset. The mayor of Tijuana threw him a parade. He was a hero. And he's gone from hero to zero. And that's not a cliche. When it applies to Nery, his photo's going to end up in Wikipedia next to hero to zero pretty quick.
And where does Casimero go from here? I'm not sure. There are opportunities for him.
Yeah, but he's also sort of entering name opponent.
Well, first of all,
right?
I let me excuse me for interrupting. I hear what you're saying about Casimero saying he having critique of Nery, but he's not totally innocent either. I remember the issue with him and Paul Butler. He has some weight history as well, so I get it. But yeah, go ahead, Gail.
I mean, I'm not seeing anybody, tossing him a big opportunity anytime soon. He is getting toward the, he really is getting towards the name opponent status in his career. I mean, he certainly, when weight issues aside, he always gives a good effort. But, he's had, and I just wanted to check my math, he's had 42 professional fights. He's 37 years old. I mean, he is kind of going through the name opponent circuit in Japan. His last couple of, let's see, four of his last 5 fights have been in Japan. The other one, I'm not sure where he was in that last fight. But if you look at his resume, the recent resume, you really have to go back almost to 2021 when he fought, of all people, Guillermo Rigondeaux. And it's been since then that he had a decent high level fight. That's the last full title fight he was in. He fought for a regional title in the Philippines at super bantamweight. But yeah, I'm not sure where he goes. I think that he faced most of the big names of his era, when he was in his prime in his era. Now, yeah, I'm not sure, unless he absolutely needs to fight for the money. I'm not sure there's any real need for him to continue. But you just never know what a guy's thinking who wants to carry on.
Indeed. Let's move from Japan over to the UK. Burnsmouth, England, to be specific. Daniel, I didn't talk about this last week. It was a bit off of my radar, but cruiserweight fight that had a lot of folks talking afterwards was Chevon Clark and Jack Massey, right? Um, from the brink of defeat, if you will, to the thrill of victory, kind of the opposite of the infamous phrase, as Clark was put down early in this fight, but he rose off the deck and ended up stopping Massey in 7. I certainly didn't see this coming, but a heck of a comeback win for Chevon Clark.
Unfortunately, I did not catch the full fight. I did see the highlights. It was pretty good just to see how good he recovered from those 2 knockdowns. Because unfortunately, sometimes when you get down to that score and after a while, you mentally don't get back, or you make an effort to try to get there, like Calixto did against Yabuki. He got knocked down in the first round. Did good for himself, even though it was still a good performance. So a good performance despite losing by that margin. And what the highlights showed, this was a pretty fun fight. This card in general turned out to be a pretty fun card overall, because not only that, obviously the main event. I'll have to say I'll eat a little bit of crow. So far, at least when it comes to the UK, Zuffa Boxing has done a good job.
And the main events, Gail, arguably the fight of the weekend. Chris Billam-Smith, right? Former cruiserweight champion, fought a guy by the name of Rozicki. And from the opening bell, this was like Rock'em Sock'em Romas. These two just went after each other, just throwing bombs. Smith got the win, but he took plenty of punishment in the process. And Rozicki, yes, he ended up in the hospital. He did release a video statement earlier today, but kudos to him as well. Didn't see this coming either. Fight of the year candidate for sure. This was thoroughly entertaining.
It was entertaining because it was action packed. You know, if you like guys throwing bombs nonstop.
I mean, if you're into violence, yeah, pure violence, yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a brawl. It was there was no real sweet science involved. And you know, a lot of people are perfectly okay with that. You know, Rozicki is who he is. He made no secret in the lead up to the fight that he did not want Chris Billam-Smith to run from him. He did not want him to move. He wanted him to stand and trade. Now, was that the smartest thing for Chris Billam-Smith to do? Hell no, it wasn't. It was ridiculous for him to do it. But, you know, it is not unusual for guys to decide, you know, I'm going to show you what I've got. Perhaps he wanted to impress his minders at Zuffa, because Chris Billam-Smith's eyes were firmly fixed on that possibility of taking on Zuffa's biggest name internal champion, which is Jayo Pataya. And so he decided, I'm gonna engage with this guy and let's go. The big difference between Billam-Smith and Rozicki is that Billam-Smith has got at least a decent amount of defensive skills. Rozicki, you know, he just says, F that, who needs defense when I've got my face and I'm going to just come for you. He's one of those guys that fits the boxing cliche of being willing to take a punch to land a punch, or take two. And the reason this fight was as competitive as it was, you had the combination of Billam-Smith with a little bit better defensive skills, evading, you know, some of the worst of the incoming fire from Rozicki. But damn, both of them have impressive chins, Rozicki in particular. There was a punch landed by Billam-Smith in the third round, about midway through the round, with lots of time left. That was a right uppercut. It's one of the hardest uppercuts I've ever seen. It was the equivalent of the shot Alexander Povetkin landed on Dillian White and just flattened his ass. I mean, it was like that, except that Rozicki took it. I mean, it visibly took his legs out from under him, but for some reason, he lurched a little bit on his feet, but he didn't wobble. He didn't get, the Gumby legs. He stood there. I think he was out on his feet, seriously. He kept going. That man is like the Terminator 2 villain character, the, cop who's a, cyber villain, right? Who's got that short, buzzed, ginger hair, that piercing look. That character was modeled after a bird of prey, and that is exactly what Rozicki was like. So he just kept coming, but he would have kept going for all 12 rounds. Thank God his corner pulled him. They saw him taking too much incoming fire. They had to have known that Billam-Smith was up on the scorecards. And indeed, when I checked, Billam-Smith was up after the 6 rounds, 4 rounds to 2, and I think 5 rounds to 1 on one of the cards. He was way ahead. So the writing was on the wall. Billam-Smith was really at that point doing a better job evading a lot of the punches, and finally the fight was over. Zuffa chair Dana White apparently told both these guys, no post-fight interviews. You're going to the hospital now. You're leaving now, both of you. And if there's anything more serious than a bit of a headache, we're going to medevac you to London. That's about 100 miles away from Bournemouth, where the fight took place. Billam-Smith checked out fine. I contacted Zuffa's representatives Saturday and asked them what, late Saturday and then again early Sunday, asked them what Rozicki's status was. As of Sunday, he had been held in the hospital being monitored. They seemed to think he was doing a lot better and would be released, and he has since posted to social media, and that's in fact what happened. But holy cow, it will certainly be on the Fight of the Year nomination list. It was dramatic. It was astonishing, frankly, to sit there and watch this going on. I will say this. I've been watching boxing a long, long time, and I've seen my share of those fights that are just, crazy slugfests like this. I'm less and less comfortable with them as they go on, because the damage done is significant. There's just no denying it. It is far better for a fighter to get that one hitter quitter, spectacular one punch knockout, fall down, out cold kind of stuff. We've all seen guys get up from those punches 30, 60 seconds later, perfectly okay. But when you fight a brawl like this and take those kind of shots round after round after round, that is serious damage. That is like being tied to the bumper of a truck and dragged down a dirt, an unpaved road full of rocks. I mean, it's that bad. The CompuBox numbers were really slow coming in. They weren't reported as part of the Zuffa broadcast. But they actually landed a very similar number of punches. This is probably not a huge surprise. Billam-Smith was 121 of 210. Rozicki was 115 of 327. But of all of those punches landed, Rozicki landed 6 jabs. That's it, 6 in 6 rounds, 6. And Billam-Smith did a little better job in that case. About a quarter of his punches were jabs. So that's that's the kind of fight you're looking at. It was just sheer carnage all the way through. And certainly Billam-Smith made his case. He did the job he needed to do, which was get Dana White's attention and say, listen, I'm worthy of getting that, big ticket Zuffa fight. And I'm sure that he decided, I need to put on a show. I need not to just win. I need to put on a show that's exciting so that it gets me that fight. A win was not going to be enough. So he couldn't, he could have outboxed Rozicki easily. He knew that to ensure he'd get that fight opportunity, that he had to fight. Just like Rozicki, toe to toe, and that's what we got to see.
To your earlier point about taking the punishment that a fighter takes sometimes in excess, I agree. It's why a few weeks back, when we were talking about Fabio Wardley and Daniel Dubois, I have such reservations that Wardley is pushing for an immediate rematch, right? Because you just can't snap back from getting hit like that over and over with hard shots. You just can't do it. You need time for your body to rest, not just on outside, but on inside, right? So Rozicki, I hope he seems like he's on the mend and he's doing okay relatively, right? Now for Billam-Smith, he did what he had to do to get the win, but looking forward, there's talk of him fighting against again Opatai later on this year. Both are signed with Zuffa. Now, does this fight here give me? Do I believe this? The chances of him beating an Opatai, I thought it was low, even heading into this fight with Rozicki. I saw nothing in this fight with Rozicki that gives evidence that Billam-Smith could beat someone like Opatai. It'll be an exciting fight, but I still have Opatai winning, maybe even stopping Billam-Smith should they fight later on this year. Let's move on to some news here, right? And because we're so early in the week, not a great amount of news coming up, but Tank Davis, he's been out of the ring for a while. Earlier today, a news drop that him and Floyd Schofield are in talks for a potential bout late September, early October. I'm hearing is a target. Now, Schofield has been named as Davis's mandatory, right? Here's a couple of questions, Daniel. One, what has Schofield? I know we have had our issues with Tank in and out of the ring, but what in the world has Schofield done to deserve this kind of fight, to deserve this kind of opportunity? One, two, do you think it will happen? Because even if it does, despite my criticisms of Tank as a boxer, he beat this kid, no doubt about it. Unless just Tank is just going off the cliff, is just totally going mentally. I don't see anything that from Schofield that suggests that he could beat someone like a Tank Davis.
To answer the first question, no. He hasn't done enough in my eyes to earn the shot, but that's why you deal with the sanctioning bodies. They're the ones that make the decision, however influenced they are. But I don't think this fight's happening. Mainly because outside of the ring, Tank just can't be able to stop sideshow bobbing himself. Either he's violating his probation or he's back in an arrest warrant, and he has cases now in 2 states. So that's probably going to have him be very, very busy when it comes to this fight. Now, if they do happen to fight, yeah, Tank's going to win. Tank's going to win mainly because he just has more experience than Schofield at this point. And while, like I said, I'll always highlight the fact that, yes, Tank was losing to Rowley before he was able to pull out that knockout. I don't think he's going to have the same issue with Schofield. And unless that's true, unless everything distraction from, like I said, drama to his legal issues overtake him mentally in the fight and allow Schofield to win. But we'll see how it goes. Like I said, he is the mandatory, but there's nothing really stopping from Davis at this point, probably marked as a quote-unquote champion in recess so he can deal with his legal issues and then have Schofield fight for an interim belt.
You agree, Gail? Yeah, they're in talks, but the percentages of this fight actually happening is pretty low.
And now I have so much skepticism seeing so-and-so is in talks. So-and-so is in talks. 90% of the time, it's hearsay, it's unprovable. The parties involved aren't confirming or denying. The only reason I am entertaining any discussion about this at all is the report is coming from one of the few reputable, trained, legit journalists in boxing left, and that's Lance Pugmire. If Lance Pugmire says in a report he has two sources knowledgeable from the camps confirming this, Lance's word is one of the few I will take. But I'm with Daniel. They might be talking. I don't think this fight's going to happen. Just because it was ordered is, Davis is mandatory, and he was threatened with having his title stripped if he didn't take it. He is not a good bet for anybody, to hang a fight card on with his legal problems, with his personal issues beyond, whether he's going to be hauled back into jail, whether he's going to stand trial again. He's a mess. He's just a mess. And I'm pretty sure that this thing will drag along till the nth minute. And I'm just not sure any promoter wants to invest their money in him only to have this thing blow up because something else comes up. It's a shame, to see somebody with undeniable skills and talent and charisma. If you've ever met Tank, in person, it's undeniable. But he wouldn't be the first fighter to have his other problems, his demons, his devil on his shoulder, his lack of a work ethic. Although I don't think in his case that's been as much the problem as it often is for other fighters. Talent alone is just simply not enough. Boxing is a
Adrian
business.
Broner, I think you're talking about, Gail.
Well, that's the one that certainly comes to mind, right? I mean, are we seeing, the son of Adrian Broner here in Davis? I don't ever believe Broner was as talented as Davis clearly is. But, if you do take a hard look at Tank's resume, it's not terrible, but it's not outstanding either.
No, it's not.
I would argue his best win was his knockout of Leo Santa Cruz, who was winning the fight until Tank, got up some gumption and stopped him. I recognize that Tank got a horrible start in life. He comes from a very troubled background. If it wasn't for Calvin Ford, we would never have heard of him, ever. But sometimes all of the help in the world, all the talent in the world that somebody recognizes and nurtures, just isn't enough. It's a very sad story, but it's not a unique story, and it's not unique just to professional athletes. It's unique in the way that it's not unique because there are a lot of everyday Americans that end up, fighting this all their lives. It's just that Tank Davis managed to rise above it and make some decent money along the way, but he has sabotaged himself. It's truly a shame. We'll see what happens. And, he does choose to come back. We'll see. I think that's a big risk, especially given how Schofield flattened Tevin Farmer out of nowhere in his last fight.
Because of his personality and because of his power, there's an element about Tank Davis that's entertaining. The question is he elite? Has he ever been elite? And to your point, Gail, he absolutely has not. One, he hasn't fought real elite competition. A and B, whenever he fought the better fighters whenever he's fought the better fighters, there's always been a scenario where he's getting outboxed, and he comes back and a lot of times will knock them out. He didn't do that in his last fight against Roach, and Roach challenged, not only, in my opinion, not only beat him physically, but mentally as well, given how Tank his body language during that fight and how he acted after the fight. That's one thing in the ring, right? Outside the ring, um, there's always been an issue with him. Uh, a lot of it was covered up early by Floyd and others, right? But with Floyd no longer there, Tank's personal issues and demons, if you will, have become more and more prominent. And we are seeing what he has gone through now post that Lamont Roach fight. You hadn't seen him in the ring, you haven't really heard from him at all, and you really don't know when he's going to come back in the ring. So yeah, the promise, the potential, the fact that he puts butts in the seats, all that aside, he's in serious danger of becoming a wasted talent. Again, do I think if this fight with Schofield happens, do I think he will win? Absolutely. Not only do I think he'll beat Schofield, he knocks him out. But that's all contingent on Tank Davis being right, quote unquote, from a mental and from an emotional perspective. And we just don't know if he is at this point. Let's move on to start doing some previews of what's fights happening this coming weekend. Excuse me. There's a card in Orlando on ESPN Plus, right? A Jake Paul card. There's two fights I want to focus on specifically. There are four women's title fights. I want to focus on two of them. One, Daniel, is Tiara Brown, right? Featherweight champion, WBC version, fighting Hannah Mop. And Brown, you can't help but like her in terms of how she conducts herself, right? She is a professional throughout, always stays in shape. Um, she is a fighter's fighter. Even in her interviews, she's confident without being too braggadocious and too cocky, right? And she's honest with herself and honest about her contemporaries, if you will. She takes a backseat to no woman, and she's willing to and wants to fight any and everyone around her. You love to see that in a fighter. Uh, your thoughts on her upcoming title defense against Hannah Rapp? Excuse me, not Mop, but Hannah Rapp.
Yeah, I try to figure out to say like if it's either Rap or Rop when it comes to the pronouncing, but your main run dynamics as far as the way she conducts herself. Tiara Brown really conducts herself to me similarly to another fighter we talked about earlier in the year, Mizuki Haruta. Both of them very humble, both of them very honest about where they stand as fighters, and both of them are pretty much, as far as their work, no nonsense. difference mainly is that Mizuki tends to be a little bit more outgoing when it comes to conventions. But Tiara Brown is one of those fighters that you can tell has a hard head mentality. I'm going to go in. I'm going to do what I need to do to get the results that's going to get me to be at the top. And I expect her to succeed fairly well in this fight. And we'll have to see what happens next because featherweight is in the range of the weight classes where one Miss Amanda Serrano likes to play with at times. And Ms. Brown, I think, has probably at least earned that type of payday with the way her performance have been lately.
We will see if she gets that opportunity to fight Amanda Serrano. And a couple of comments here before I go to you, Gail, in terms of our discussion about Schofield and Tank from Life Is. He says, don't let Schofield Sr. hear you doubting his son. Schofield Sr. says I don't care what he has to say.
He can talk.
You know,
he can talk all he wants. Schofield
right? And if he really has an issue, he's welcome to. There's an open door policy here. Come on and defend himself and his son. All I care about.
I think there's some. I think there's some humor there in that comment. That's how I'm reading it. Unfortunately, Schofield Sr. is one of these guys that gives the father-son trader athlete combo a bad name.
Right. And one of the reasons there's such pushback against his son is because of his dad in his mouth.
And it is a tough one because if you know the Schofield's stories, Schofield Sr. was a single father. He and Floyd Jr. were homeless for a time, lived out of a car. But he took care of his child. He took care of his obligations as a father, and I will respect him for that. And as his son has risen up through the ranks, I think that he has forgotten where they came from, forgotten what his role needs to be. And when you're confusing your role of father and trainer, it's not a good combination. There needs to be a firewall in between, especially because he gets himself so wound up. If you've heard Floyd Sr. discuss his various conspiracy theories along his son's career, he does come off as just batshit crazy. Not a good thing. He has stepped back, thankfully, from the trainer role, and I have no doubt that Schofield's tremendous performance against Farmer, was because he finally had some breathing room. But, he can't quite, this is his dad, right? And he certainly honors what his father has done for him and put him in this position. But there are a lot of people out there in the boxing community. Those of us who talk about them, occasionally criticize them, or get at them in a stronger way, and not just critique, but give them a hard time. You know what? You need to develop a thick skin. You need to hide like a rhino if you're going to survive in this business. Nobody is going to perform up to 100% all the time. But we all know that the people who succeed take it with grace, accept the lessons learned, and they don't make themselves so damn difficult to work with. Because eventually, no matter how much athletic talent there is, how much hell do you want to go through? How much? No, none of us who work for a living, which I assume almost everybody in the sound of my voice who isn't retired has to work for a living. None of us like to work with difficult people, right? In your own workplace. How many of us have worked with somebody who's undeniably skilled, does a great job, but they are such a big pain in the ass to work with? They're combative, or they're bossy, or they don't take directions. They don't play well with others. They hog the limelight. Let's just go through the list of things that a coworker can do that makes your life a living hell. Their talent can't overcome how tough they are to work with. I'll never forget a CEO I worked with for a long time who was trying to hire for a very key position said, here's my philosophy. There are a lot of skilled people in the world, but there are a lot of people who can acquire those skills. They're teachable, they're eager to learn, and they fit well in a team. They play nice with others. But once an asshole, always an asshole. And he wasn't going to hire anybody like that, no matter how good they were at their job. So, case in point here, Schofield Sr. needs to not taint his son with that brush. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Right. I think it's always the best policy to prove it in the ring. And it seems, unfortunately, that Schofield Sr. he's a camera hog. He loves to hear himself talk. And we've seen that before in the sport, right? Of dads overtaking their sons. And it's one thing and part of the reason I want this to go on to possibly see where this goes is because let's see if Schofield Sr. is he all, how can I put this? I don't want to be too offensive. Let's just see if his bite matches his bark, right? Does he really want to put his son in there with him? Does he really? It's one thing to go on these media outlets and say it and say what your son would do, but when the rubber meets the road and the contract is in your hands, right? You can find your say to finagle your way out of that fight, asking for too much money, yada 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 yada. So if he's about that, we will see. I'm not sure. Now I'll just leave it at that. And to your earlier point, I hear you. Life, Schofield is all over. Let me put it back up here. Schofield is all over these YouTube streets. It will give you a tongue lashing if you doubt him, son. Well, I'll tell you this. We'll be cordial, we'll be professional and all that. But if he ever comes on here and starts and tries it here, not with me, because I ain't gonna be like some of these other media outlets who basically lets him go off and not have any real pushback. No, sir. He's not immune to that here. Not only does he have myself, but he has a fiery redhead here who's afraid of no one in this media business. And if he tries it with her or Daniel, I will have their back, and I'll just leave it at that. But if he wants to come on and defend his son, and okay, the door is open. The door is open. I'll just leave it at that. Right. Back to the boxing previews, Gail. Also on the same card as Tiara Brown, you have someone who I consider one of the best women's fighters in the world, right? Evelyn Bermudez, unified champion at 108 pounds. She's also won belts at 105 pounds. I just love the way she's a little bit cocky. She's tall. She can fight southpaw or lefty. She can fight inside or outside. Decent power. One of the most skilled fighters, regardless of gender, in the world. And I'm really looking forward to her more on that card than anyone else.
Bermudez is a classic female fighter from Argentina. We all know they bring it. They're tough. They're very proud. And she has been smart enough to become part of this juggernaut, this MVPW juggernaut. We're only talking about a pair of title fights, but there are 4 title fights on this card, as there has been for virtually every card in the MVPW series. This is the 4th such card. There are now, I think, 6 or 7 of them on the calendar. And the matchups are tough. These are, women who want to preserve the belts. They are getting paid well. And MVP also follows the performance bonus, fight of the night bonus structure that's come out of mixed martial arts, except that they pay a lot more. If you win performance of the night, you're getting a couple $100,000, not the measly $50,000 that certain, MMA CEO pays out. And on occasion, some of these ladies decide, hey, they talk up how well they're going to perform, and they talk both Jake Paul and Nikisa Badirian, the co-CEOs of MVP, into putting up some other kind of a prize besides their purse. And in Tiara Brown's case, they talked about buying her a car. They've done this now for a couple of their women fighters. Well, apparently this week she went out and picked up her new Mercedes SUV. Very nice looking ride. So the ladies have a lot of motivation to bring it. And, the platform just simply can't be denied. They are fighting on ESPN. And admittedly, this particular card, they're fighting on the ESPN app, and nevertheless, they're getting a huge potential audience. So they know this. They know that to continue to get these opportunities and to get the paydays, unlike any they've had in their career before hitting MVP, they got to bring it. They not only have to win, they have to be entertaining, and if that sounds like something we just talked about, you're right. That's the same motivation that somebody like Chris Billam-Smith has to do well, because he wants to make sure that he is back, not just because he won, but because the audience says, I want to see that guy again. And here we've had Evelyn Bermudez, going along, getting win after win. She is in one of the lower weight divisions, but for the women, that's a little less of a handicap than it is for the men. This will be her, gosh, I'm going to have to count, but I think this is maybe her 10th or 11th title defense in a row. That's phenomenal. At least of the IBF belt, when she added the WBO belt, that might only be her 8th title defense. Her only loss was to Yokasta Valle, which is very interesting. I'm not sure.
And that fight could have went back and forth. That was a very close fight. Very close.
Now, Valle just lost on the previous MVPW3 card, and it wasn't actually that close. She's showing a little slippage, as she's reaching veteran status.
I would argue that Valle's best performance was against Bermudez when they fought a few years back.
I wouldn't argue that. And, I think if Valle had won and Bermudez wins on Saturday, which, let's face it, I think she will, I wouldn't have been surprised to see a rematch. I'm not entirely unconvinced there won't be a rematch because they're under the same banner. And Bermudez is one of the women who does have knockout power. To say somebody has 8 knockouts in 22 fights, if I was to say that about some of the men, you'd say, well, okay, well, that's not so great, right? That's a, knockout percentage that's quite a bit under 50%. But remember, they're fighting 2-minute rounds. And I did an article, it's been some years ago, when Amanda Serrano was really starting to make a lot of noise about 3-minute rounds. Her knockout percentage, if you match 2-minute rounds from the top women knockout artists and looking at the men who score a lot of knockouts, where did they score their knockouts? If you take away from their knockout percentage any fight that ended in the 3rd minute of the round, the top men and women are exactly the same. the knockout percentage would be exactly the same if the men were fighting 2-minute rounds. It is very illuminating. So when you see somebody, whose name maybe you don't know, who's 22-1 but has 8 knockouts, and they're fighting 2-minute rounds, you need to pay attention.
Indeed, and again, this fight between Bermudez, she's fighting a lady by the name of Estefany Alegria. That's part of a 4 women's world title card. Again, that's going to be in Orlando, Florida, on the 13th on ESPN Plus. Also, on that same evening, Daniel, a card in Glendale, Arizona, on the Zone, talked a lot about Elif Turhan when she destroyed Ferreira, right, to win the women's lightweight belt IBF version. But in her first title defense, maybe a lot of folks, myself included, was guilty of being prisoner in a moment, as she won, but she just was not as dynamic as she was as when she beat Ferreira, who was talked about being the bull. Patrice Pereira, who was talked about being the bully at 135 pounds, had to kind of temper our enthusiasm. Turhan returns to fight Gabriela Tellez. On paper, I think is a good fight, but it's an opportunity to see, is Turhan the fighter? Is Turhan the fighter that we saw destroy Pereira, or is she more the fighter that showed up during her first title defense?
That's going to be the factor, because it was 2 extremes in between those 2 fights. Like you mentioned it, destroyed Ferreira out of nowhere. And their first title defense, what happens, unfortunately, what I've seen a lot of times, some fighters, when they make their first defense, they tend to be a little bit more careful, just in case they feel like they rush in the moment or they think about it. I think you're going to get a performance against Tellez somewhere in the middle. Toronto, she's probably going to have to come in more aggressive, show a little bit more intensity like she did in the fight to win the belt. But she also knows she doesn't have to be reckless. And Tellez not exactly a slouch either, but this is going to be a fight where Toronto's going to set her expectations. And I think you're going to find that middle in between, like that monster that showed up to win the belt and the person that was a little bit too careful in the first defense. This is going to be the one where you're going to see the actual range that Toronto's going to fall under.
This fight between Turhan and Tellez, the main undercard, Gail, of a headliner, Antonio Vargas and Jesse Bam Rodriguez, the bantamweight debut of Rodriguez. We all know Bam is an elite fighter, right? Former unified champion at 112 and 115, moving up to 118 to fight Vargas. I don't want to besmirch Vargas here, but I don't even think he's close to the best fighter, being the best fighter at 100 at bantamweight, right? And I know technically Bam is the smaller man, but above average elite smaller men who's skilled and who can punch will beat decent, good, bigger men. And I think that's what I believe that's what we're going to see here. There's levels to this. And because Bam, from a technical standpoint, from a skills standpoint, I think he's levels above a Vargas. Not that Vargas is a bum. He's far from it. But Bam is top tier. And he's going to show that in this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was a smart move for him to jump up, test himself at the weight, see how he feels. And, oh, by the way, grab a belt for his trouble. I think he'll put on
That's
the
right.
kind of performance we are all used to seeing. Bam has never disappointed. I don't expect him to do it this week. But it is a test. It is maybe a little bit of a shot across the bow. You know, he is the kind of guy that just goes about his business, takes care of his business. He doesn't mess around. I do note as his career has progressed, he wears the aura of a champion who is just supremely confident in himself. He's very matter of fact about it. He's not braggadocious about it. He's not offensive about it. He's just very matter of fact about this is who I am. This is what I do. I love that about him.
Self-assured, much in the same way that Andre Ward was during his days.
Though Andre at times would rub people the wrong way. Now, Andre, earned his right to present himself that way. Bam has still just a little touch of I'm a regular guy who does extraordinary things about him, which I think endears him to a lot of people. But yeah, he is so self-assured. It's truly amazing. And to think that he is still well shy of 30 years old is sort of astonishing, especially in the current environment where these guys aren't always matched up tough enough, in their first half of their 20s. We all know how Bam rose to prominence. Unexpected door swung open for him to take a title fight at the last minute. He did it, he won, and the train has kept on rolling. He has a wonderful fan base in Arizona. Glendale, Greater Phoenix area has really turned out to be a good fight town for these sort of fight cards. And who isn't looking forward to this? But, Bam took the best fight he could that was available to him under the circumstances. He's not sitting on his ass waiting for the perfect matchup. He's not sort of killing time waiting to win the Inoue sweepstakes. And that's exactly what he needs to do at this age. Every fight for him, there's still things to learn, and it keeps him in front of the fans. There's a lot going on. Fans, even when they enjoy watching a fighter, if they disappear for months and months at a time, they forget about him. Somebody else is going to rise up and take the place in their entertainment diet. So Bam knows better, and I'm glad to see him getting out there.
And he's staying active. Daniel, what you always love from a young fighter. Do I think that Vargas is better than Takuma in a way? No. Do I think he's better than Medina? They're close to even. Do I think he's better than Salas, the IBF champion? No. Actually, Salas, the IBF champion, maybe the second best in the division. Just people hadn't seen him enough. I have. He's a heck of a fighter. But in this fight with Vargas, all Bam has to do, as far as I'm concerned, he's the better boxer. He's the better technician. He has the better footwork, and I think he's faster. Just use his skills, and he should win.
He should. Like I said, this isn't a fight where you can say that it's going to be close to evenly matched when you look at it on paper. And let's be fair when it comes to Bam. This situation, you can always fall trap into looking ahead. Obviously, looking ahead, that means you're already thinking New Year's Eve anyway. That's why you can always be wary when it comes to something being a trap fight. But luckily, Bam has a good circle around him that will keep him more focused, keep him more in tune, saying this is what you need to do. This is what needs to happen. This needs to happen. This is what's at stake, but you have to do this first. So I expect a very composed Bam, more of like a showcase performance in this area, because if it comes to late, then maybe Inoue has changed his mind, and obviously New Year's Eve is the premier fight date in Japan. Doesn't matter if it's boxing or MMA. Then I think Bam's going to take care of business.
And I intend to agree. When I say Salas, I'm talking about Jose Salas Reyes, who is the IBF champion at 18 pounds. He won that belt, vacant belt in December, but he hasn't fought since, unfortunately. I think it's a scenario that people kind of low key insiders know how good he is, and there are some who really don't really want to get in the ring with him as a result. But that's another discussion for another day. I wished my dream scenario that Salas would have fought once in would have fought by now this year, and he would have got that opportunity to fight Bam, because I think that would have had the chance to be a heck of a fight. But that's a discussion for another day, and I think we're going to end things on that note. I want to thank Life Is for his commentary. I'll go around the panel here. As I said earlier, we begin ladies first, in this show with ladies first. Go to you, Gail from NYFlights.com, and Gail Sweet Science for all things boxing. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Easy peasy. The written column is at nyfights.com, nyfights.com. By the way, I am also on Substack under my name, and there is no subscription charge. I am reposting my columns there along with sort of some extra comment and observations, if you will. So the most recent was about the Billam-Smith versus Rozicki freight train that we watched on Saturday. And I am on YouTube, Gail Falkenthal Unboxing. I will have a new interview up with rising welterweight prospect who hopes to jump to contender here in the next year, and that is Caden Griffith, who's going to be on the undercard featuring the great Oscar Collazo coming up next week here in San Diego at Front Wave Arena. If you are within the sound of my voice and you're in Southern California, get yourself down there. It's going to be a dandy little card, a lot of fun. That's a fun arena. It seats 7,500, so every seat is a good seat.
I'll go to you, Daniel, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Well, you see it on the socials. Doesn't matter if it's anywhere, like Twitter, Blue Sky, Counter Social, Spoutable, Spill. Anywhere you go, Roxanne9, definitely catch me on there. And we're already through the halfway point, folks. We're already hit through the halfway point. And we've had a pretty good, I would say, a surprisingly good year compared to the outlook that we kind of had at the beginning. Hopefully now the second half of the year we get filled up in more fights, because we know there may be some announcements coming up fairly soon.
For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, and all things smell good, you know what it is with me on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X. Brother JR at Brother JR76, excuse me, if you want to also check me out on IG, Brother JRSC, as well as Blue Sky, Brother JRSC. As I said earlier in the show, Pound for Pound Boxing affiliates with Navrad and Nazar Fragrances. Use the code MichaelWP4P. You get 15% off on all fragrances and body care products over at Navrad, and on all fragrances and body oils over at Nazar Fragrances. On the next episode, we will have a recap of the ladies for world title doubleheader. We mentioned Tiara Brown and Evelyn Bermudez. We will also recap O'Shea Jones, who's defending the IBF 154-pound belt, fighting Elia Carranza, and Jasmine Ortega, who's fighting Natalie Delgado. Ortega's defending the WBA 115-pound belt. Again, that card is happening June 13th in Orlando on ESPN Plus. We will also recap the bantamweight debut of Jesse Bam Rodriguez, who's moving up in weight to fight Antonio Vargas for Vargas's WBA belts. Also, going to review Elif Turhan, who's making the second defense of the IBF lightweight belt against Gabriela Tellez, and do a preview of the aforementioned Oscar Collazo, who's going to fight Joey Canoy. Collazo, one of the best fighters in the world, regardless of weight, unified champion at 105 pounds. That's going to be on the 20th in Gail's home area, Oceanside. Also, a day before that, interesting about, well, depends on your perspective. Ashton Sylvie, Jojo Diaz, we may talk about that. We may talk about that bout. So, yeah, episode 490, pound for pound boxing in the books for Gail of NYFights.com and Gail Falkenthal on boxing. For Daniel of 4 Boxing News Indian Scriber, I am your host, Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.